September 26, 1942. Richmond, California. The sun was barely up over the shipyard. A woman named Rosie walked through the gates with her lunch pail and welding gear. She was 5'3", weighed maybe 110 pounds. The men around her thought she'd last maybe a week. They'd seen plenty of women come and go. This was hard work, real work, men's work, or so they thought. Rosie Monroe didn't care what they thought. She needed this job. Her husband was overseas fighting. She had a daughter to feed, and she was about to do something that would make headlines across the country and hit subscribe right now, because what happened next changed everything about how America won this war. She'd build an entire ship in just 4 days. Not repair one, build one from scratch. And she'd do it so fast that German submarine captains would start losing sleep. The Germans were confident in 1942. Real confidence. Their U-boats were called the Wolf Packs. They hunted in groups, coordinated attacks, radio communications, new tactics the Allies couldn't stop, and they were winning. In 1942, German submarines sank over 6 million tons of Allied shipping. That's more than 1,000 ships sent to the bottom. Cargo vessels, tankers, troop transports. The British were starving. Supplies weren't getting through. Food was rationed. Fuel was running low. Churchill said the U-boat threat was the only thing that really scared him during the whole war. German submarine commander Otto Kretschmer was a legend. He'd sunk 44 ships, almost 300,000 tons. His crew called him Silent Otto because he'd sneak up on convoys without making a sound. He wrote in his diary that the Atlantic was a turkey shoot. American ships were slow, poorly built, easy targets. He said one torpedo could break a Liberty ship in half. The steel was cheap. The welds were weak. They came apart like toys. His submarine could sink 3 or 4 in a single night, and there weren't enough ships to replace them. That's what he thought. Here's what Kretschmer didn't know. In shipyards across America, something was happening that would make his hunting grounds disappear. Women were picking up welding torches. Not just a few women. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. And they weren't just filling in. They were getting good. Really good. Better than the men in some cases. Faster too. And one woman in particular was about to prove that speed could win a war. The Liberty ship was supposed to save the Atlantic. That was the plan anyway. Britain needed cargo ships. Needed them desperately. Traditional shipbuilding took months, sometimes over a year for a single vessel. The Allies were losing ships faster than they could build them. So America came up with a new idea. A simple design. Basic cargo hauler. Nothing fancy. Just a big floating box that could carry 10,000 tons of supplies. Trucks, tanks, food, ammunition. Whatever Britain needed to survive. The design was based on an old British ship from the 1870s. Outdated, ugly, slow. Sailors called them floating coffins. They said the ships were so poorly made they'd break apart in rough seas. Some did. The steel was welded, not riveted. Faster to build but weaker, or so everyone believed. Maximum speed was 11 knots. A German U-boat could do 17 knots on the surface. These ships couldn't outrun anything. They were targets. Slow, fat targets. But they could carry a lot of cargo. And that's all that mattered. President Roosevelt announced America would build 2,700 Liberty ships. The number seemed impossible. Insane even. German military planners laughed when they heard it. Their intelligence report said American shipyards could maybe build 500 ships a year if they were lucky. They'd been building ships for decades and knew it took months to construct a single vessel. Skilled workers were needed. Trained crews. Experienced welders. You couldn't just hire anyone off the street and expect them to build ships. That's not how it worked. But Henry Kaiser had a different idea. He'd built dams, bridges, big projects done fast. He looked at shipbuilding like an assembly line. Break it down into simple tasks. Train workers on one specific job. Use prefabrication. Build sections on land. Then piece them together in the water. Faster, cheaper. And you didn't need years of experience. You needed workers who could follow instructions and work hard. That's it. The shipyard started hiring anyone who could hold a torch. Farm boys, factory workers, teachers, and women. Lots of women. The men were overseas fighting. Someone had to build the ships. By 1943, Women made up almost 30% of shipyard workers. Some yards it was even higher. They worked the graveyard shift. They worked in the rain. They climbed inside the hulls where it was hot and cramped and dark. They welded seams that had to be perfect because lives depended on it. Rosie Monroe was one of those welders. She started in August 1942. No experience. Never held a welding torch before. They gave her 2 weeks of training. Basic stuff. How to strike an arc. How to make a clean bead. How to not burn yourself. Then they put her to work. She was assigned to the overnight shift. Midnight to 8 in the morning. Inside the ship's hull. Tight spaces. Bad ventilation. Summer heat trapped inside the steel. It was miserable. Other women quit after a few days. Rosie kept showing up. She was fast from the start. Her welds were clean. Smooth beads with no gaps. No slag. No defects. The inspectors were impressed. She didn't waste time. Didn't take long breaks. She'd finish a seam and move to the next one. Other welders would do maybe 30 feet of welding in a shift. Rosie was doing 50, then 60. The foreman noticed. They started giving her the critical welds, the ones that mattered. Pressure hulls, stress points, places where a bad weld could sink a ship. In September 1942, the Richmond Shipyard announced a competition. Which team could build a Liberty ship the fastest? Every yard wanted to break records, impress the Navy, get their names in the papers, boost morale, show the Germans and Japanese that American workers were the best in the world. The record at the time was about 30 days, a ship built from keel laying to launch in a month. That was considered incredible, revolutionary even. Rosie's team decided to go for it. They built a ship in under 2 weeks, maybe 10 days if everything went perfect. They practiced, planned out every movement, every weld, every rivet. The hull sections were pre-built on land. The engines were installed and tested before going in. Everything was ready, just had to put it all together. November 12, 1942, the keel was laid for the SS Robert E. Peary. That's when the clock started. The prefabricated sections were moved into place. Cranes lifted huge chunks of steel. Workers guided them down. Welders like Rosie sealed the seams. Riveters fastened the plates. Electricians ran wiring. Plumbers installed pipes. Painters followed behind. It was organized chaos. Hundreds of workers moving in perfect coordination. Like a dance. Day 1, the hull took shape. Day 2, the deck was going on. Day 3, the superstructure was being assembled. Day 4, engines were being lowered in. The Germans thought this was propaganda. Fake news to boost American morale. No shipyard in the world could build a ship this fast. It was impossible. Their own yards needed at least 300 days to build a submarine. And that was with experienced workers and modern equipment. A cargo ship in under 2 weeks? Ridiculous. For days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel was laid, the SS Robert E. Peary was ready for launch. Complete, functional, ready to carry cargo across the Atlantic. The ship was 441 feet long, 7 holds for cargo, could carry 10,800 tons, and it was built faster than anyone thought possible. Newsreel cameras were there. Reporters from every major paper. The story went national, then international. Rosie Monroe was featured in the newsreels. They filmed her welding inside a ship's hull. The footage showed her in coveralls and a welding mask, sparks flying, torch in hand, working fast and precise. The narrator called her Rosie the Riveter. The name stuck, not just for her but for every woman working in war factories across America. She became the face of American industrial might, the symbol of what civilians were doing to win the war. The Germans couldn't believe it. Their intelligence officers studied the reports, interviewed prisoners of war who'd worked in American factories before the war. They confirmed it was real. America was building ships faster than Germany could sink them. Much faster. A U-boat took months to build. Trained crews took years to develop. Every submarine lost was a major setback. But America was launching a new Liberty ship every day. Sometimes 2 or 3 a day from different yards. U-boat commander Peter Kramer wrote about the change in his memoir. Early in the war, his patrol areas were full of targets, convoys everywhere, easy pickings. But by late 1943, something shifted. There were more ships than before, many more. He'd sink 2 freighters, and by the time he got back to port, 4 new ones had already replaced them. It was like fighting the tide. Pointless. Exhausting. His crew's morale collapsed. What was the point of sinking ships if more just kept coming? The numbers were devastating. In 1943, American shipyards built 1,896 ships. That's more than 5 ships launched every single day. More than 19 million tons of shipping. Germany's entire merchant fleet at the start of the war was only 8 million tons. America was building more ships in 8 months than Germany had owned in total. And these were just cargo ships, not counting warships, not counting landing craft, not counting tankers. By 1944, the U-boat threat was over, not because the Allies had better technology, not because they'd cracked the codes. They had, but that wasn't the main reason. The U-boats lost because they couldn't sink ships fast enough. America was building them faster than Germany could destroy them. A U-boat might sink 3 ships in a patrol. America launched 15 new ones that same week. The math didn't work. The wolf packs were starving. Admiral Dönitz commanded Germany's submarine fleet. He calculated that to win the Atlantic, his U-boats needed to sink 700,000 tons of shipping per month. That would strangle Britain, cut off supplies, force them to surrender. In November 1942, his boat sank 700,000 tons. He thought he was winning, but that same month, American and British shipyards launched 1.2 million tons of new ships. The Allies weren't losing, they were gaining. Dönitz didn't understand how it was possible. Liberty ships carried everything. Tanks rolled right onto the deck through bow doors. Locomotives were loaded whole. Planes were strapped down. Food supplies filled the holds. Medical equipment, ammunition, fuel, everything an army needed to fight was carried on Liberty ships. They supplied the D-Day invasion. They supplied the Soviet Union through the Arctic convoys. They supplied MacArthur in the Pacific. They were everywhere. Some Liberty ships were lost. About 200 were sunk by U-boats. Another 30 or so from other causes. Mines, air attacks, storms. A few broke in half from stress fractures in cold water. That made headlines. But here's the thing. America built 2,710 Liberty ships total. Losing 200 was less than 8%. That's nothing. Acceptable losses. There were always more ships ready to go. Always another convoy. The supply line never stopped. The German submarine crews knew they'd lost by 1944. They kept fighting because they had to. Orders were orders. But they knew. Werner Henke commanded U-515. He sank 25 ships in his career. He was good at his job. But in April 1944, his submarine was depth-charged and forced to surface. American destroyers captured him. During his interrogation, he told American officers the truth. Germany never had a chance. He said the war was over the moment America's factories started running full speed. No amount of skill or bravery could overcome that kind of production. His words, not mine. Rosie Monroe kept working until the war ended. She welded on dozens of ships, trained new workers, became a supervisor. After the war, she went back to being a housewife, raised her daughter, lived a quiet life in Kentucky. She never talked much about her time in the shipyards. It was just a job, something she had to do. But the image of her welding became one of the most famous symbols of World War II. Rosie the Riveter posters are still everywhere. Museums, history books. We remember her not just as a welder but as proof that regular people doing ordinary jobs can change history. The Liberty ships kept sailing long after the war ended. Some were scrapped. Some were sold to other countries. Greece bought a bunch. So did Italy. A few are still around today. The SS John W. Brown is in Baltimore. Still operational. They take it out for cruises. You can tour it. Walk the decks. See where Rosie and thousands of others built these ships in days instead of months. It's smaller than you'd think. Kind of ugly, honestly. But it worked. And that's all that mattered. Here's the final number that really tells the story. Germany built 1,100 U-boats during the entire war. It took years, required their best engineers and workers, cost a fortune. America built 2,710 Liberty ships in less than 4 years, with partially trained workers, many of whom had never set foot in a shipyard before 1941, with women making up almost a third of the workforce. built them so fast the Germans couldn't keep up, built them so cheap they were almost disposable, and built them in such numbers that the outcome was never really in doubt. That's how one woman with a welding torch helped win World War II. Not through heroics, not through some brilliant strategy, just by showing up, working hard, doing her job better and faster than anyone thought possible. Rosie Monroe proved that wars aren't just won by soldiers, they're won by workers, by ordinary people doing extraordinary things, by believing that impossible is just another word for difficult. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll cover how American bomber crews survived missions that had a 70% casualty rate and still showed up the next day. If you want to see that story, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. These people deserve to be remembered. See you in the next one.